Welcome to the 2016-17 Wrestling Rules Clinic. My name is Chuck Barbee, and I'm the NCAA Wrestling Secretary Rules Editor and Weight Management Liaison. Since this is a non-rule change year, the vast majority of this presentation will deal with points of emphasis and clarification of existing rules. If after watching this video, you have questions regarding rules interpretation or weight management issues, please contact myself, Chuck Barbee. If you have questions relating to refereeing or refereeing mechanics, please direct those questions to Mr. Tim Shiels. Each of our contact information can be found in the front of the 2016-17 NCAA Wrestling Rules book. Let's get started. For the 2016-17 season, we have no truly new rules, since each of these rules came from interpretations that were fully incorporated into the 2015-16 season. Each of these rules came at the recommendation of the NCAA Sports Science Institute, and both of them involve health and safety issues related to student athletes. While this is a non-rule change year, the NCAA Wrestling Rules Committee felt that it was important to further codify these health and safety issues for the upcoming season. Each of these rules are being presented as new rules, but please remember they are identical to the rules interpretations that were used for the entire 2015-2016 season. Rule 6.1.2, Calling Injury Timeout. This rule clarifies the protocol for calling injury timeouts during a match. It affirms that the referee is responsible for calling timeouts, and when an injury timeout is called, the injury time clock shall not be started until the medical personnel arrive at the match. An additional highlight of this rule is the emphasis on the fact that referees do have the prerogative to stop the match to determine if there is a need for an injury timeout. With referees being so close to the action, the Rules Committee felt it very important that if they were concerned, they need to have the ability to stop the bout to inquire further as to the possibility of an injury before anyone is actually charged or request a timeout. Rule 6.1.2.1, Coaching during an injury timeout. This rule makes it clear that you shall not coach a non-bleeding injured athlete. This prohibition against coaching an injured athlete helps to provide the medical personnel the adequate time and the focused attention of the student athlete so that they can make a quick and decisive diagnosis on the potential of injury. The Rules Committee does acknowledge the benefits of having the coach on the mat to help settle a severely injured athlete, but once the athlete is stabilized, the coach should immediately return to their respective corner so the medical personnel can provide a proper examination. Finally, as was the case last season, coaches may still coach athletes during bleeding timeouts. The Rules Committee would like to remind all individuals that during a Rule 6.1.5 concussion evaluation timeout, the medical staff has unlimited and unimpeded time to evaluate the potentially injured wrestler. During the medical staff's evaluation, the match will be suspended and all individuals will stay in their appropriate corners as directed by the referees. During dual meets, the match is suspended, and during tournaments, the mat is suspended until a medical decision is rendered. Concussion evaluation timeouts can only be called by the referee or the medical personnel and do not count towards injury time or recovery time. And as a reminder, any injury time that gets converted to a concussion evaluation timeout is to be handled as a concussion evaluation timeout only. The committee would also like to remind individuals that while removing the injured athlete from the mat to perform the concussion evaluation is not required, it is the preferred method for evaluating for a concussion. We will now go into the points of emphasis portion of this presentation. In the upcoming slides, I've provided a variety of pictures, videos, text, as well as audio descriptions and interpretations. In addition to listening and watching closely to the presentation, please review the text content thoroughly, and if you have any questions, consult your rulebook, the CenterMat website, or email me for the proper rule and/or interpretation. In order to maintain proper control, continuity, and flow to individual wrestling matches, as well as dual meets and tournaments, there are limitations on the number of times you can question the referee on a specific topic. None of the rules have changed, but I would like to reemphasize a few areas. The first reminder is that coaches do have an unlimited ability to question timing and scoring during a given match. Coaches, remember, it is very important that you follow the proper protocols for questioning timing and scoring so that it will be acknowledged by the referee. This specific protocol is outlined on the CenterMat website under the Master Interpretations document, but the general procedure is that the coach should proceed to the head table and indicate to the scorer that they would like to question timing and scoring. The head table will then notify the referee, who will stop the bout. After the coach has indicated their concern to the referee, they will return to the coaching area, and the referee will work with the head scorer to determine if an error did occur. Remember, this process is very important since all match errors must be corrected within the match itself. In regards to 3.12.1.b, which deals with questioning rules application, coaches can question the application of the rule or any rule by approaching the head table and indicating that they would like a match stoppage. Once the referee has listened to the question, they can make a correction if necessary. If no correction is necessary, then the requesting coach will be penalized for questioning the referee and the match will proceed. Penalties for questioning the referee are cumulative through a dual meet as well as throughout individual multi-day tournaments and multi-day competition tournaments. And finally, Rule 3.13, Control of Mat Area, was strengthened in 2015-16 and is in place to keep coaches from badgering referees and also to have them stay in their respective corners. The penalty sequence noted on the slide is also cumulative throughout all dual meets and individual events and team events, whether they be single-day or multi-day events. In this next section, I will provide some points of emphasis in regards to illegal holds. When talking about illegal holds, it is important to understand that holds listed in the rules book are illegal upon application. Illegal holds are designed to protect student athletes in situations that are known to cause injury the majority of the time. Student athletes should be aware of illegal holds and work to avoid these situations so that individuals are not injured and they are not penalized. Rule 5.8.1 Illegal Holds. Under Rules Book Section 5.8.1 Illegal Holds, the following high single leg finish was determined to be illegal during the 2015-16 season. The rules book states that the twisting or forcing of the head or limb beyond its normal range of movement is not allowed. This particular single leg finish relies on twisting or forcing the lower leg beyond its normal range of movement in order to be executed. The rules interpretation was reaffirmed by the NCAA Wrestling Rules Committee during its April 2016 meeting. Please pay particular attention to the photograph provided and note that this single leg finish is only illegal in the specific position described in the picture. All other high single leg finishes are legal. Referees or coaches, please contact me if you have any questions in regards to the proper interpretation of this particular illegal hold. There's been some confusion on the proper application of the rule regarding legal or illegal cutbacks. The pictures on these slides are taken from the current edition of the rules book. The picture on the left demonstrates a legal cutback maneuver in which a wrestler uses his hand to sit the wrestler back onto his buttocks. The picture on the right demonstrates the wrestler illegally using his leg to execute a cutback. The point of emphasis on this technique is that any time the wrestler uses their leg, the move is considered illegal. In the following slide, you will see a video in which the wrestler uses both his hand and the leg to execute a cutback. In this particular video example, this technique should have been ruled an illegal hold, the match stopped, penalty point assessed, and recovery time awarded. When viewing this video and when considering all illegal holds in the rules book, please remember that holds listed as illegal are illegal by application alone. The individual that the illegal hold is being executed on does not have to be injured in order for it to be considered an illegal move. The final illegal hold that we'll talk about is the illegal double knee kickback. The rules book states that the opponent shall not use the feet to kick behind the knees in an attempt to bring him back to the mat. Because we've seen this rule applied a variety of ways, I'm making this a point of emphasis for the upcoming season. In the two pictures presented on the slide, you can see examples of an athlete applying an illegal double knee kickback. An illegal double knee kickback is characterized by the wrestler in the rear standing position leaving both feet and using either the bottoms of the feet, as shown in the left picture, or the tops of the feet or shin, as shown in the right picture, to kick anywhere behind the knees of the opponent. In the following slide, I will provide an example of a similar mat return that would not be considered illegal. In this slide, you see a photograph of what would be considered a legal double knee kickback mat return. In order to execute this mat return legally, the wrestler in the rear standing position cannot leave his feet in order to block behind both knees. Note in this picture that both of the feet of the individual in the rear standing position are firmly planted on the mat. In the following slide, you will see a video of this move executed. In this upcoming section, I will continue with points of emphasis for rules related to wrestling areas on the mat. I will also spend some time reviewing some important concepts found in your wrestling rules book. Rule 5.9.2.6 and Rule 5.18 discusses interlocking fingers. The rule regarding interlocking fingers is unchanged for the upcoming season, with only one point of emphasis. As was interpreted in the 2015-16 season, interlocking fingers and releasing within a reaction time does not warrant a warning or a stall call. However, for 2016-17 season, I want to emphasize that if two wrestlers are repeatedly grasping and releasing of fingers, even if this grasping and interlocking is within reaction time, this should warrant a warning and/or a stall call on one or both wrestlers. In the following slides, I'm going to discuss the concept of control and reaction time as it relates to scoring points. Keep in mind, I am not issuing any new interpretations, but simply providing points of emphasis so that we might improve in these areas for the 2016-17 season. Reaction time is an important concept. However, it is not specifically prescribed in the rules book. Reaction time is determined by the individual referee. There has been some confusion in past seasons in regards to when reaction time should be considered and when it should not be considered. Currently, there are only two specific instances in which the referee does not have to decide if reaction time was satisfied. The first one is when an athlete has an individual in a standing control position and the wrestler being taken down touches their hand to the mat. This is commonly called the hand touch takedown and is specifically described in the rules book on page number 93 and picture number 50, and less specifically described in Rule 2.6. The second instance of when reaction time is not utilized is when there is a locked hands call while the wrestlers are down on the mat. Because an instantaneous clasping of the hands can sometimes stop a technique from being successful, reaction time is not allowed. Keep in mind, however, when executing a mat return or finishing a takedown, wrestlers are provided reaction time to release their lock. When talking about reaction time as it relates to scoring points within a match, It's important that we review and make sure to understand that the rules book is clear that the wrestler must have or have lost control prior to determining whether reaction time was achieved. The rules book has numerous statements related to the concept of control, and on this slide you can see 3 specific passages related to scoring takedowns, escapes, and reversals. So as we know, reaction time exists in all areas except the ones previously discussed. So when determining whether points are scored in a match, 2 criteria must exist. First, control has to be established, and secondly, the control has to be established beyond reaction time. When utilizing video review for all areas other than the standing control to a hand-touch takedown and the locked hands call while on the mat, the criteria for scoring points would be, was there control, and was there control beyond reaction time? When looking at how the rules book describes scoring a hand-touch takedown after control is established in the neutral position, the rules states that the referee would look for only a hand touch on the mat to determine whether a takedown is to be scored. Remember, this hand touch can be instantaneous and does not need to be established beyond reaction time. In the following video, you will see a series of takedowns that demonstrate the hand touch takedown, followed by a second slide that contains several videos that demonstrate takedowns that would not be determined by the hand touch, but rather by whether control was established and held for the period of time that the referee determines is reaction time. Now that we've seen a couple of video clips showing the hand touch takedown, let's contrast that with a few videos that show wrestlers pursuing takedowns while on the mat. In these instances, the rules state that you would be looking not for a hand touch, but rather was control established, and was that control established beyond reaction time. When viewing these clips, keep in mind we're not trying to judge whether the calls are correct or incorrect, because only the referee on the mat makes the determination if control was established and established beyond the reaction time needed. Now I'd like to move into Rule 5.9.3, stalling in the offensive and defensive position, also called the drop-down rule. There are no changes to the application or interpretation of Rule 5.9.3 for the 2016-17 season. In the following slide, I will, however, discuss several points of emphasis the Rules Committee would like to make for the upcoming season. Rule 5.9.3, Points of Emphasis. The first one is in the down position. When the defensive wrestler actually goes to the lower leg of the top wrestler first, the offensive wrestler is able to drop down to the lower leg to defend the attack, and no count should occur. Also, because the Rules Committee does not want a wrestler that is being aggressive, attacking, and securing takedowns to be unduly penalized, we want to make three important points of emphasis related to the drop-down rule after a takedown has been secured. The first is after an individual secures a takedown, they are provided a reasonable amount of time to work up from that takedown before a count should begin. The second interpretation to emphasize is if a takedown is secured and a scramble occurs immediately after awarding that takedown, and the offensive wrestler cannot work up, this should also not warrant a count, but rather a stalemate call. And finally, if a wrestler secures a takedown and then is prohibited from working back up because, for example, the attacking wrestler's head is trapped, then a count would not be initiated and a stalemate would be called. These points of emphasis and all other videos and interpretations presented on the Arbiter Center Mat website during the 2015-16 season will continue to apply for the upcoming season. I would encourage you to go to the Arbiter Center Mat, click on the Videos tab, and re-watch all of the interpretation videos from last season. In the next section, I will focus on Rule 5.9.2, Neutral Position Stalling. This was a very difficult rule to implement during the 2015-16 season, and I want to commend all of our referees, coaches, and athletes who did an outstanding job implementing and applying this new rule. There are no changes to any portion of this rule or interpretations for 5.9.2. There are, however, several points of emphasis that I will review in the following slides in the hopes that we will continue to improve our application and understanding of this rule. The first area that I would like to discuss is a quick review of stalling. The rules book states that stalling is defined as one or both wrestlers attempting to avoid wrestling action as an offensive or defensive strategy. Prior to the implementation of the current neutral stalling rules, the wrestling community universally accepted the practice of pushing or pulling individuals off the mat or getting a fresh start on the out-of-bounds line as just being part of wrestling. With the implementation of Rule 5.9.2, and in order to make continued progress, we must reinforce to ourselves and the greater wrestling community that forcing an unnecessary restart from the neutral position is in fact avoiding wrestling action as an offensive or defensive strategy and therefore stalling. When an out-of-bounds call is made from the neutral position, Rule 5.9.2 requires that the referee make one of three calls. In the following slides, we will review the thresholds required to determine who should receive the stall call or whether action is taking place. Rule 5.9.2.A Review. If Wrestler A is pursuing Wrestler B to compete, and Wrestler B backs out of bounds with minimal to no effort to circle back into the competition area, Wrestler B is considered stalling. This is a very important threshold since it's the cornerstone to all of the other calls. Please remember this threshold applies in any neutral wrestling situation, but it does not apply when defending attacks from the opponent. For example, if a wrestler is on the out-of-bounds line and his opponent executes a leg attack that drives them out of bounds, the wrestler defending the leg attack should not be called for stalling. Keep in mind, the wrestler with his back to the line is allowed to defend the attack, but the referee is also allowed to make a traditional stall call at any time during the match. In the following slide, you will see a classic example of a wrestler backing out of bounds, demonstrating little to no effort to circle back in bounds. Please note this video is from the 2014-15 season, so the appropriate stall call is not demonstrated in this clip. Rule 5.9.2.b Review. This rule says that if wrestler A is on or near the out-of-bounds line and actively trying to circle into the competition area and is met by his opponent, wrestler B, who is pushing simply to impede, inhibit, or block wrestler A's attempts to circle in bounds, and this action results in an out-of-bounds call, then this is considered out-of-bounds stalling by pushing on wrestler B. I will reinforce the pushing rule in a later slide, but please note again that the pushing call applies in all neutral wrestling situations, with the exception of when a legitimate wrestling maneuver is being executed. In the following slide, you will see a video clip from the 2014-15 season, in which the wrestler would now be called for stalling by pushing, since his actions are simply to impede, inhibit, or block his opponent's attempts to circle in bounds, and to delay the match by forcing a neutral restart. While not as commonly seen, the second portion of Rule 5.9.2.b states that if a wrestler pulls an opponent out of bounds in the neutral position to avoid being scored on and or to unnecessarily force a restart, then this is considered neutral stalling by pulling. Finally, in Rule 5.9.2.c, the action call, if two wrestlers are on the out-of-bounds line and they are demonstrating aggressive wrestling by actively executing a technique or defending a wrestling attack, and the out-of-bounds line is playing little to no role in their decision-making, then this would be an action call. In the following slide, you'll see a good example of an action call. Again, this video is from the previous season when Rule 5.9.2 was not in place, so the action call will not be demonstrated by the referee in this clip. We're now finished with the Rule 5.9.2 Neutral Stalling Review, and I'm going to go into the points of emphasis for the 2016-17 season. There are four primary areas that I will be emphasizing: the stall call after escapes, back-to-back stall calls, the pushing stall call, and the pulling stall call. The first point of emphasis for Rule 5.9.2 revolves around the correct interpretation of when to call an athlete for stalling after an escape has occurred and both athletes have been declared out of bounds. For 2016-17, I want to reinforce that when the defensive wrestler escapes from the offensive wrestler, and in the course of this action they are immediately carried out of bounds, this should not warrant an out-of-bounds stall call. However, when the defensive wrestler escapes from the offensive wrestler and both athletes are clearly in bounds, with each wrestler fully stabilized, balanced, and in their stance, and then one or both wrestlers backs out of bounds, this will warrant an out-of-bounds stall call. Again, this interpretation was in place and regularly applied during the 2015-16 season, but I believe this reinforcement should add to the overall clarity in that situation. The second point of emphasis is the neutral stalling call and the correct interpretation of the rule in regards to making back-to-back stall calls. For this upcoming season, I want to emphasize that a traditional stall call that is immediately followed by the wrestlers going out of bounds does not require an additional stall call for going out of bounds. However, if there is any delay between the traditional stall call and the wrestler backing out of bounds with no effort to circle back in bounds, then it is both a traditional stall call and an out-of-bounds stall call. This rule interpretation was also in place for the entire 2015-16 season and frequently called this way. In order for us to continue to improve our understanding and application of Rule 5.9.2, this is an important point to remember. The pushing call for Rule 5.9.2 is a very important portion of the rule. We had reasonable success during the 2015-16 season in applying this rule, but I believe some additional clarity in regards to my interpretation of what constitutes pushing will assist everyone. For the upcoming season, I would like to emphasize that mirroring an athlete and then using the chest, hands, or head to push an athlete out of bounds is stalling by pushing. Please remember, however, I am emphasizing chest, hands, or head to push an athlete out of bounds, but the core concept of a wrestler not being able to push an athlete who is actively trying to circle in bounds applies in all neutral situations. On the other hand, and this is very important, mirroring an athlete and then attacking the opponent by executing a legitimate wrestling maneuver, and in the course of executing that legitimate wrestling maneuver, the action goes out of bounds, then the attacking wrestler should not be called for stalling by pushing, but rather an action call. It's important to remember that even though a wrestler is allowed to defend a legitimate wrestling maneuver on the out-of-bounds line, they still have an obligation to be aggressive and look for scoring opportunities while in bounds. Any wrestler that continually brings the action to the out-of-bounds line should be called for traditional stalling. My last point of emphasis is in regards to neutral stalling by pulling. This is not an extremely common call, but it is important to remember that from any neutral wrestling position, if an athlete pulls an individual out of bounds to force a restart, they will be called for stalling. Probably the most commonly seen scenario in this situation would be when a wrestler is kicking out from a lower leg attack. Keep in mind that per Rule 5.9.2.3, that any kick out that results in an out-of-bounds call is a mandatory stalling by pulling call. Again, that call can be made using Rule 5.9.2 or 5.9.2.3. As a counterpoint to this point of emphasis, if a wrestler is in the neutral position and kicks out of a single leg, and that kick out does not result in the referee issuing an out-of-bounds call, then that wrestler would not be called for stalling. Wrestling action would continue. In this next section, I'll provide information that will help in the execution of the video review as prescribed by the rules book in Rule 3.21. The number of video reviews for tournaments or dual meets have not changed. As per Rule 3.21.2.b, if video review is being used for the entire tournament, such as the case at the NCAA championships, each team will continue to receive a specified number of reviews based on the number of entries they have in the event. All teams will continue to receive one review for each dual meet. However, if video review is being used for only certain portions of a tournament, then the teams will follow the tournament committee's decision on the number of reviews they shall be awarded. The tournament committee can set any number of reviews per team as long as it does not exceed the allotment specified in Rule 3.21.2.b. As a reminder, tournament committees must inform coaches no later than weigh-ins about the rounds in which the video review is being used, and also the number of reviews being provided to each team. Additionally, the tournament committees are responsible for tracking the number of video reviews used by each team and penalizing as necessary when teams exceed that allotment. As outlined in Rule 3.21.2.a, referees are allowed to stop the match to execute a review at any time. The primary emphasis for 2016-17 is to reinforce the portion of the rules book that states the referee may stop the bout. This passage is very important because it reminds us that if the coach is the one to stop the bout by raising the video review flag, then they will be charged with a video review. A coach cannot stop the bout to execute a video review and then ask the referee to do their own review. If a referee wishes to execute a review, they must be the ones to stop the action on the mat. If in the rare instance a coach stops the bout to exercise a video review, and the referee does want to execute their own video review, then the referee shall always execute their review first, and then the coach review would follow immediately after that. If a coach stops the bout without raising the video review challenge flag, and upon speaking to the referee, they indicate that they want the referee to execute a referee challenge, the referee does have the prerogative to use their own video review or not. Regardless of whether they decide to use a referee review, the coach would be charged with questioning the referee violation as per Rule 3.12.b. Finally, if a coach stops the bout to use a video challenge, then the referee shall not exercise a referee's review after that challenge. The only instance in which a referee review could occur after a coach's challenge would be to correct timing or scoring. Finally, I would like to emphasize a few areas related to the execution of the coach's challenge. Coaches, when requesting a review, please remember you must approach the scores table immediately and raise the flag. As I previously mentioned, once the flag is raised, the video review cannot be retracted and will be executed and charged. Coaches' video review challenges may never be converted to referee challenges. Once the flag is raised and the referee has stopped the bout, explain clearly the exact issue that you wish to have reviewed. For instance, I'm challenging that the takedown you awarded was not a takedown. I believe there was a missed locked hands call. Or I believe that the wrestlers were out of bounds before the takedown was awarded. Once you've explained the situation, then you must return to your corner while the review occurs. Please note the referee is obligated to review only the exact situation that was requested by the coach using a video review challenge. Unchallenged issues, with the exception of timing or scoring, discovered in the coach review are not alterable by the referee. Starting September 1st, 2016, the NCAA has moved back to its previous model of having the Secretary Rules Editor also serve as the weight management liaison. This means for the upcoming season and beyond, you will send not only the rules interpretation questions, but also any weight management questions to my email address that you can find in the front of the 2016-17 Wrestling Rules book. My first point of emphasis is to remind coaches and tournament directors that per the rules book, the medical exam and weigh-in are considered a single event. On the slide, you see Rules 9.1.4 and 9.1.2 that outline the requirement for student athletes. Athletes shall appear properly groomed, wearing no less than a suitable undergarment and ready to step on their assigned scale. The rules do not allow individuals to report for medical exams, leave, and then report for weigh-ins. Each student-athlete must report at the prescribed time in a suitable undergarment, stay in the assigned area, and no weight loss efforts can be underway. Rule 9.2 is clear about the consequences for student-athletes who fail to make weight or pass medical exams at the designated time. For tournaments, the athlete is out of the tournament and the opponent receives a forfeit. With tournaments, individuals do have the ability to make a request for consideration to the tournament committee to allow them to weigh in. Whatever decision the tournament committee makes is, however, considered final. For dual meets, an individual who fails to make weight or pass medical exams at the designated time is ineligible for competition and the opposing wrestler receives a forfeit. As I mentioned previously, the rules specifying the requirements for showing up at the medical exam at the proper time are very important, since an individual that is allowed more time to make weight has an unfair advantage over those student-athletes that arrive when they are required. As a reminder, Rule 8.3.3 requires all student-athletes to be down to their lowest allowable weight class by February 15th. Coaches, please keep a close eye on this deadline since there is no appeal for missing this date. Also, as a regular reminder, coaches, when confirming your student-athletes' weight loss assessments at the beginning of the year, please be sure to communicate with all parties involved as to the proper weight class. As stated in Rule 8.3.1, once the official assessment data is entered into the NWCA Optimal Performance Calculator system by both the coach and the assessor, the information cannot be changed or altered. An incorrect entry may not be appealed. Finally, to wrap up the Secretary Rules Editor portion of this presentation, I'd like to go over in the next couple of slides a few administrative items for the upcoming season. It's very important that we're all on the same page in regards to where important information will be located throughout the season. As in 2015-16, rules interpretations, clarifications, and points of emphasis will always be placed and found on the Arbiter Center Mat website and your rules book. As mentioned earlier, I strongly encourage each coach and referee to review the 2015-16 video interpretation documents and read through the master interpretation documents found on the Center Mat website. Coaches will also find their weight management announcements primarily on the Track Wrestling website throughout the 2016-17 season. Finally, I want to take a moment to provide referees and coaches some important rules dates to keep in mind. In December of 2016, the NCAA Wrestling Rules Committee will issue a call for proposals to all coaches, referees, and administrators. This is your opportunity to provide input to the Rules Committee on any new rules proposals that you'd like to be considered. You can also look on or around January of 2017, our annual rules survey and feedback mechanism that gets sent to all coaches, referees, and administrators. This will be your chance to provide any additional feedback on the current and existing rules, and the Rules Committee will be sure to review all of these comments at their April 2017 Rules Committee annual meeting. I hope everyone has a great year and best of luck in the upcoming season.